بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. How is everyone this evening? Friday night, what do you guys have here? Like a 200-hour commute or something? Is that what it is? It's really far. Alright, can I ask you guys a favor though, before I start? I feel like there's like a lot of distance between myself and all of you, and I'm not really getting the love. So if you have serious back issues, no problem. Get the wall. But if you don't, you could show me the love for your brother from Texas and just come a bit closer, inshallah. For no other reason, because I love you for the sake of Allah.
We can move your table closer.
That's the other option, but then you're going to mess up the camera guy, and then all these other issues are going to come up, right?
Good excuse.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so, by the way, one of the things that you'll notice, and inshallah, for those of you who will be coming tomorrow, you'll notice this tomorrow too, is that the way I kind of present and teach, etc., is that I like it to be very interactive. So if you thought that you're going to come here for a nice, relaxing family night, you're going to hear a speaker, and maybe if he's boring enough, you can sit in the back and take a nap, that's not going to be tonight. And most likely it's not going to be tomorrow either, right? So, before I jump into the topic, well, first of all, does anyone know what the topic is? So atheism, okay, you're in the ballpark. That's good. So we're in atheism. Within atheism, there's a specific topic. Suffering. Finding peace in suffering. Okay. Anybody else want to? You're close though. The meaning, or finding meaning in suffering. Very good. Okay. So before I jump into that particular topic, I wanted to give you guys a bit of you can say a sample for tomorrow. Because why I'm doing that is because a lot of times when we think, okay, there's a course on atheism or a course on dawah, we have certain preconceived notions in terms of what the course will be like. Alright, so will you guys allow me to do that? Yes? Okay, alhamdulillah. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a couple of thought experiments. And I'd like you to think about it, but not, this might sound kind of odd, but don't think about it from the perspective of you being a Muslim. I want you to imagine, and may Allah protect all of us, that you didn't believe in God. And I want you to think about how would you now tackle this particular thought experiment. Okay, so here it is. And if you've studied philosophy, you know that this is quite a popular one. So I want you to imagine now that you are on a train, okay? And you are the driver of the train. And now, what you notice is as the train's moving forward, the brakes have failed. So now the brakes have failed. In front of you are 5 individuals. So now you're panicking, and you think, hold on a second, if the train keeps going, boom, these individuals, they're not going to live. However, you notice that there's a track that's going on one side. And you say, okay, I could just turn the train, because you can still turn it. The brakes aren't working, but you can turn it. However, at the end of that track, there's one individual. So what do you do in this circumstance? I'm not asking myself this question, by the way. Not a rhetorical question. Yes?
Which one will save me?
Who will save you?
Which track will save me?
No, well, I mean, you'll be fine. Inshallah. You'll be safe because you're on the train. Yeah. So what do you think?
It's kind of cool. Because if you turn to the left and you kill that person,
yeah,
you live guilty. Because you caused yourself to turn into the other track to kill one guy.
So then wouldn't you be guilty for not turning and saving 5?
Well, you can blame it on the train.
That'll help you feel better, sleep at night? Yeah, I mean, 5 people are gone. I saved that one guy. I'm good to go. All right. Anybody else? Sisters, anybody else? Sisters can speak in this masjid, right? Just messing with you guys. Just messing. It's a Texas joke. All right. So, sisters, what are you going to do? Are you going to turn the train, kill the one person, or are you going to let it go and kill 5? You don't. I mean, it's a split-second decision. You can't just be like, hold on, let me stop. Wait, the brakes are working. It's not going to work like that, right?
I would probably turn.
You would turn? Okay. But I thought you were not going to turn.
No.
You changed it.
I had so much time on the train.
Okay. Sister, anyone, would you turn? You would turn? Okay, so basically, you would turn and kill one person and save 5 people. Okay, so here's, how many people would turn? Okay, so I think most of you. Would anyone not turn?
I would try to warn them. We are not believing in God, right?
Yeah. So remember, the context
I know,
is,
because
if you believe in God, it's a different context. But I'm saying, let's assume there is no God. I'm not going to say that. What I'm saying is, assume that you don't have a belief in God, right? So what we're saying is, there's the train. What do? Right?
Is the horn working?
Is the horn working? No, the horn is not working. Everyone's deaf. No, I'm kidding. It's not. It's not working. So I think most of you would turn the train, correct? Yes? Okay. Is there anyone who would not turn the train? You would not turn the train.
There's a third option, that even if you don't believe in God, suddenly you say, if there is a God,
Yeah.
and you don't turn, and you become a believer.
Sure.
That could be the third option, right?
Could be. Maybe. But
Not today, not today.
we're going to assume that it's pretty split second. So they don't have time to really think about it. So, yes.
No horn?
No horn, I'm sorry. And even if there was, we said they're all deaf. The thing is, in philosophy, the reason they do these experiments, these thought experiments, is because they want to have you make a certain choice, right? So there's no third option, unfortunately. Yes?
Actually, we should turn because if you turn, then you'll only be charged for manslaughter for only one person instead of five.
Ah, I see. Okay. So that was my next question. Since most of us are saying we would turn, why would you turn? So you're saying, legally, you'd be charged with manslaughter. Okay, but, I mean, you don't really have control in the train, right? So would you still be, do you think legally, is there any, so anyone study law here? Any legal scholars? All of your where's Usher? There we go. He thought he was just going to organize the event and go back and watch whatever movie they're watching. So, the question was, if you are driving a train, the brakes fail, right? And the only option you have is to let the train go straight. It'll kill 5 people, or you could turn it and it'll kill 1 person. So someone mentioned that I would turn the train because you'd only get charged with manslaughter for killing 1 person instead of 5. So my question was would you be charged at all? Because you don't really have control.
You don't know how to train fail.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not manslaughter.
So it's not manslaughter. Okay. So the legal reason perhaps not there. But let me ask you this. Yeah, go ahead.
no, I think what he said about guilt.
Guilt.
Even if you don't believe in Allah, you still have some sort of guilt, right?
Sure.
You killed 5 people.
Sure.
When you could have killed
Only
only one.
1, right. Okay.
Anyway,
So here's the thing. So I'm thinking everyone kind of agrees that we would kill 1 person, right? I'm actually saying this in the masjid on camera. Anyways, kill 1 person instead of 5 people, right? Okay. Now let me just change the scenario a little bit, okay? And remember, the context is God. We're not believing that, okay? Now let's say that you're not driving the train, but you're standing on a bridge and you're watching this train going really fast towards these 5 people, and they don't know and they can't hear you, right? And next to you on this bridge is this really big, fat, enormous individual who's also looking at the train. And you know that he's big enough that if you were just to nudge him a little, he would drop in front of the train, stop it, and you would save those 5 people.
I would do it.
You would do it? Okay, how many people would just give him a little nudge? Raise your hands. Okay, who would not do it? Okay, a lot of you. Okay, so why would you not do it? No, you'll get the target. You know, he's big enough that he'll take 3 tracks.
They have no responsibility, but they're saving 5.
But in a sense, okay, so you don't want to be responsible for killing him.
That
Okay.
manslaughter.
Yeah, you might have a case there, right?
Might have a case there.
Yes.
No, actually, it's the blame. You don't want to be blamed for intentionally killing somebody.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So here's the thing. Let's put the legal ramifications aside.
No, within you. It doesn't matter.
Within yourself. Okay. So now the question is, why is scenario 1 different than scenario 2? You do have a choice, though. You do have a choice. And here is 1 or 5.
Yes, but the guy standing, why should that do it?
Why not?
Destined to be.
But you don't believe in destiny. You don't believe in God. You can't be like a qadar, you know. Yes, way back there. Let me listen, please. Yes.
In scenario 1,
But in this case, it's certain too. You're assuming certainty in both cases.
But if you push him,
Yeah.
But because you're blaming somebody else, not yourself.
Okay.
Because if you push that somebody into
Yeah.
a train,
Yeah.
you are the only one who's, you are directly responsible for pushing it. But if the train, so it's kind of,
So let me ask you
in the
this.
first case scenario, you blame the train for going out of control.
Sure. Okay.
But in the second case, you are the one who caused somebody to die.
Okay.
So you push them off.
Agreed. So here's my thing. Remember, I said putting legal issues aside.
No, it's within yourself.
Okay. Wait. Stop.
Stop.
Within yourself, right? Okay. So now the question is, what is that thing within yourself that's going to stop you? Your conscience. What does that mean? And not in the context of believing in God.
remorse. I don't know.
Where does it come from? Okay. These are the people that don't believe in God. Fitrat Allah. Right? Okay. Yes.
Fear?
What is it?
Fear?
Fear of what?
Of getting blamed yourself?
But remember, we said there's no legal consequences.
So like, you feel you're afraid you're going to, when you get released, kind of be sad for the rest of that day you killed someone.
But in both cases, you'd be killing one person. So what my question is, why in scenario 2 would you not, for the people that said you wouldn't push the person, for the people that said they would push the person, first of all, who would push the person? Let me get some hands. Okay.
Basically pushing them, can you emotionally blackmail them?
Well, no, let's make it easy. Let me make it easy. Let me make it easier. Instead of pushing them, because people have this issue, okay, pushing them, So imagine now you have a device in front of you that looks just like the steering wheel of a train. And all you do is turn it and the guy falls down. So literally the action is the same, right? In both scenarios. So again, in one scenario, some of you said you would not push the person. So for those who said you would not push the person, my question is, why? All right, there's no legal ramifications, so you can't give me a legal answer. Wait, hold on.
Making a decision for someone else.
Okay.
It's not his choice.
But was it the choice of the one guy that you killed when you turned it?
No, so that at that moment, so you making a decision better for the society.
The society. How do you? Whoa! Wait a minute.
So the norm is the less people die, the better, right?
Right.
So you're trying to save 5 versus 1.
Okay.
So
But in this case, hold on. Wait.
That's the norm in the society we follow.
Right. But in this case, you're saving 5 by just killing 1. What's the difference?
I'm saving 6 in fact. 5 here, 1 on the other side.
What
And
do you
this
mean?
guy's about to explode anyway. No, but the way you explained it to us,
No. What I meant was he was big. Let's say he's a bodybuilder. That's not what I meant. What I meant is he's big enough to stop the train. That's all I meant. Okay. So yes. Wait. Yes.
I think there's a difference. You physically being right next to the person,
Mhm.
pushing them down is different than if you're in a train with a barrier. You can't hear them screaming. They're kind of far away. I
So
think the closer they are to you,
yeah.
the more guilt you feel because they're right next
So
to you.
that's my question though. Where does the guilt come from? Why guilt? Where does it come from? Like you don't have a belief in God, so
You
you.
don't feel guilt. Something's wrong.
Like if you were
Why is something wrong?
Oh, I get it. So if, for example, if you were in their position and you're like, okay, if I were in their position
Yeah.
and someone were to stop the train,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean?
Like if it was switched and you were the
Yeah,
person that
if
you
it was
pushed.
in reverse, like you'd want someone to do that for you.
No, I mean that's not what I mean. What I mean is like, okay, so there's this inherent sense of guilt. All I'm saying is, why do you feel guilty? In both scenarios, you have 5 versus 1.
Well, because you're making the assumption that these 5 are worth more than the 1. What if the 1 is a scholar and the 5 are bad people?
Okay.
What if it's a pregnant woman?
So
what
let me-
if it's a child? I mean,
What?
why is the assumption
Okay,
that 5 is worth more than 1?
that's a very good question, right? And I would ask that question as well. So for the people that would turn the train, is this a valid point though?
No, it's not.
How would you know?
You don't know. Maybe the
Right?
one is more.
I mean, it could be someone's dressed like Shaykh al-Islam, and these people are just pious, and they're just dressed like ordinary people. How would you know?
That's the answer to your question, is that doubt of not knowing to be able to make the judgment of who's more worthy
Okay.
will keep you feeling guilty inside. Because you're not
That's the core of my
necessarily-
question though.
You're not necessarily
Why?
making a better decision. You're actually
Okay, let me get some hands back here. Hold on. Yes, in the, what's your shirt say? Wildcats? Class 21? Yeah.
I
So you're afraid of society. Okay. So now we're going to get into this, by the way.
Not so much
So-
afraid of society, it's like you've been set an example by society.
Sure. Which is an excellent point, because tomorrow, inshallah, we're going to cover a section of the course called objective morality. And this is something that is, we think about kind of the atheist idea and framework, and sometimes atheists make some very objective claims, and sometimes they make them against Islam, which I'm always very surprised about, right? You Muslims do this, and moral claims as if they're objective, right? Tomorrow we're going to be getting into, so I just kind of tested your moral intuition here. And frankly, no one could give me a very solid reason as to why 1/5, with the exception of that 5 is more than 1. That's your best case scenario, right? So we want to ask, what is what we call ontological, moral anchor for the human being if it's not God? One of them is society. But then we're going to see there's certain issues if you depend upon society to determine your morals, right? And I'm sure some of you are probably thinking of examples right now, right? And there's other, I think our battery died.
Are you serious?
I am very serious. Silicon Valley for you. All right, so I'm just going to try to project my voice. So I'm going to pause that for a second. Let me give you, so who are the people that said that they would push the guy over? Raise your hands again. So you had a few people there. Okay, let me give you a third scenario. All right? Let's say now that you work in a hospital and you have 5 people that came in that were just hit by a train. Each one of them needs an organ. And one guy comes in to get a checkup. And you know that you could take his organs and save those 5 people. Remember, no legal consequences. What do you do?
Man, what do you do for a living?
Train, orbits.
Are you sure you're coming to
I study philosophy. All right. So what do you do? How many people would say, you know what, if there's no legal... Okay, I'm going to save my voice for tomorrow. All right, so I don't have to scream now. Didn't do that. All right, so how many people would go in and get rid of the guy and save the 5? You would do it? Okay, why?
On one end, you did take a Hippocratic oath, so that's probably the wrong thing to do.
Okay.
But I feel like you personally, knowing that you killing that one person saved those 5,
Yeah.
you're helping 5 people's families as opposed to 1. So you have to personally live with the guilt, but I'd rather live with the guilt myself than let 5.
So you're saying that this guy that just happened to stroll in for a checkup, he's like, I'm going to get my checkup today, and you're like, yeah, have a seat, man. And you go in like, oh, those 5 guys. And it's basically like, you would do that?
I mean, I would have to live with the guilt, and he doesn't deserve it, but I feel like...
But so what, right? 5 is more than 1.
It would be worth it.
Okay, so the thing is, the purpose... Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so it looks like based on the responses, looks like you are going towards that you cannot decide unless you bring in God conscience in it.
Hold on, what is that?
This one.
Oh, that's someone's phone. Okay, yeah. Sorry, go ahead one more time.
So I'm saying that based on the how you are responding to all the answers,
Yeah.
looks like you are leaning towards you cannot decide unless you have some kind of belief.
I think there's no right or wrong answer. There's no right or wrong answer.
So the thing is, there is no right or wrong answer if you have no belief in God. Right? Because again, and like I said, we'll get into a lot more detail with this tomorrow, we have to understand what is the ontological moral anchor for your morals. Right? If you claim something to be right or wrong, what we say objectively, not subject to society, right? And we all make those moral claims many times. And some of them, they just come naturally. We said, well, we would feel guilt. I go, why would you feel guilt? Right? Why are you guilty? You don't believe in an afterlife. You don't have any sort of concept of divine retribution or anything like that. So it was just, and by the way, so this is just my kind of, my sample for tomorrow to test your moral intuition, right? In philosophy, intuition is actually a valid source of knowledge, in fact, right? And so we're going to see more about this, just to give you kind of a taste for tomorrow. Now, just very quickly, some of the things we're going to cover tomorrow. So we're going to cover objective morality. You saw one of those exercises today. We're going to cover the implications of atheism, all right? Meaning that if you are an atheist, that has certain implications for your life, how you live and how you deal with people, that if you took them to their logical conclusions, they become very problematic. So we're going to take a look at that tomorrow. We're also going to take a look at a couple of key arguments against atheism. All right? One of those arguments is what's known as the argument from dependency or contingency. Now, I taught this course at UT Austin, and the benefit for them was that instead of getting it in 8 hours, they got it for the whole semester, like a class a week. But I made a condition. I said, look, if you're going to take this class, you want me to teach it over the semester, you'll have to use the information at your dawah table. And alhamdulillah, the semester before that, there was no class, nothing, no dawah. I mean, well, they had a dawah table, but it was just people coming, getting candy, and leaving. So there's no dawah table. The semester that we taught it, we had 11 shahadas. Alhamdulillah. And 6 of those shahadas, because I know people say, oh, 11 shahadas, but then the real question is, how many people actually stay in Islam? 6 out of them were practicing, they came to masjid, started learning salah, etc. Right? And when I asked them, I said, which argument that we presented did you like the best? They said it was the dependency argument. And as we're going to see tomorrow, it's interesting, and in fact, we've taken it from classical sources anyways. Right? So Imam al-Ghazali mentions it, Ibn Taymiyyah mentions it, a lot of scholars, they mention it, and they mention it for the reason that it's very powerful and very effective. So that's going to be the third thing we're going to mention. We're also going to be looking at the philosophy of science. How many people, well, before I say that, how many people think that the Quran is scientific miracles? Raise your hands. Okay, a big chunk of you. All right, so let me tell you something, but I don't want you to give the announcement of a fatwa to say that I'm kafir and chase me out of the masjid. Okay? I don't say that there are scientific miracles in the Quran. Whoa, man, are you serious? Where's this guy coming from? What's going on in Texas? Right? Now let me explain why, and we'll get into a lot more detail about this tomorrow. When you think about science as an endeavor, the philosophy of science, what we have to understand is science has a certain, what we call epistemic value, meaning epistemology is a study of knowledge. How do you know what you know? So certain ideas have certain truth values. With science, you can never, based on its methodology, which we'll get into tomorrow, you can never come to 100% certainty. And that is the beauty of science. You're always discovering new things. So science, as an endeavor, is mutable. The Quran is absolute. So what are you saying when you're saying the Quran is scientific miracles? You're saying this thing that's moving is proving that this stable, absolute thing is true. Do you see the problem with the method? And what is the result of this method? The result is you have a young person that goes to his geology professor and says, in the Quran it says, وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا, that that the mountains are like pegs. And the geology professor says, hold on, but current research suggests more in the realm of like tectonic plates. So clearly your ancient book is wrong. So what happens to the iman of that young person? Boom, now you've got some, and now you see young people, they're like, you know what, we're not really sure. We don't know what's going on. So one of the other topics we're covering is what's known as the philosophy of science. We want to dig down a little bit, and we want to look at that. And the last, well actually there's a couple more, but I'll just mention one more. The other one we're going to be speaking about is looking at the veracity of the Quran. And what I mean by that is showing that the Quran is from Allah without reference to the Arabic language. Meaning you don't have to know Arabic to make a case for the Quran. Now, let me clarify that. I'm not saying you shouldn't study Arabic, right? Or that you can understand the Quran without Arabic. I'm saying you can make a case for the Quran without direct reference to Arabic based on other tools and methods that we're going to learn about tomorrow. How does that sound to you guys? Good? Excited for tomorrow? Hopefully? Right? I'm going to mess with you a lot more tomorrow. So be ready, inshallah. Okay, now let's come to the topic. Man, it took him too long. Inshallah, it's not going to be that long, inshallah. Okay, so the topic is, why does God allow suffering? And I was mentioning to some of the brothers in the hallway that in fact, this is a topic that when we have what you may call like interfaith or dialogues or whatever, we do this as a topic. We say, why does God allow suffering? A Christian Muslim perspective. And what you find is that the Muslim perspective actually is very, very, very clear. And the Christian perspective it's very difficult. I was mentioning a bit earlier, the last time we did it was in a place called Lubbock, Texas. Anyone heard of this place? You have? Really? Shocked. I didn't hear about it until I got there. Anyways, okay, so it's the university there is Texas Tech. And so we had this conversation with another pastor, and man, he was in bad shape. I mean, at times, and he brought his whole congregation to the talk, and his wife. And at a certain point in the conversation, he said, I know my congregation is going to be upset with me, and I know the conversation in the bedroom tonight is going to go really bad, because his wife was there, but I gotta say, I cannot understand how a absolute, all-loving God could allow evil. And so the statements that he was making was saying, God doesn't know everything. And his congregation, when he said that, you heard this gasp, like, ugh, like what is he saying? And then at another point he said, God is not capable over everything. Again, you hear this gasp, right? Because he said that we are capable, we are 100% capable of our own actions. God has no bearing on our actions. So again, you've heard this gasp and so on and so forth. So, anyway, the point is that from the Islamic framework, it's not that we don't deal with the issue, but the point is that our stance on the issue, because of our understanding of the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is unequivocally very palatable. Let's put it that way. It's very clear. Okay? So now, let me state the issue. By the way, who knows what I'm talking about when I say the problem of evil? Does anyone know what the issue is itself? What is the issue? Who knows? No one. You guys don't study philosophy here? It's just all tech? Mathematics only? Yeah. Logic? You guys study logic? No, but no, I'm not talking about, what do they call it? Machine logic. I mean like logic. All right. So what is the problem? Anyone know? What is the issue? What is this? Why is this even a problem? I mean, if you don't know, it's great. We can just go home. Let me mention one thing. The question, okay. The question is, there is a certain problem known as the problem of evil. And it goes back to the question of why does God allow suffering? Let's make it easy. Okay? But why is that a problem? Why do people think of that as a problem? Like, what is the construct?
People should not suffer.
Okay. Why should people not suffer?
Because God loves them and they should live in peace when time is starting to come to the end.
Okay, good. You were about to say something?
Evil cannot come from good.
Okay. Yes, you can say something.
They think something is normal, and when it goes, something like things happen in a life which against the normal.
Yeah.
This thing they are suffering. So.
Okay. So it goes against normality. Yeah.
I think when God first made the first humans, they did have the perfect life.
Okay.
I think the difference with humans with other creatures God has created is we have free will.
Yeah.
And so since we have free will, we do it to ourselves.
So I'm not asking the answer, I'm asking the problem. So, but it's a good answer though. Very good answer. Okay, so let me just kind of give you the kind of the systematic way that's formulated. Okay? Typically when people talk about the problem of evil, there's two forms of this problem. Alright? One is known as the logical form, one is known as the evidential form. But they both are generally the same. And what they say is that when you look at people who believe in God, they accept three superlative attributes. That God is almighty, that God is all-loving or all-good or all-merciful, right? We'll just say all-good for purposes of our discussion. So God is almighty, He's all-good, and He's all-knowing. And if He is all-loving and all-good, He does not want evil to exist. He doesn't want people to suffer. If He's almighty, He is capable of stopping it. And if He's all-knowing, He knows it is happening. So why is there evil in the world? You get the dilemma, right? And this is what we call the problem of evil. Okay, how do we solve this dilemma? Who wants to help me out? So I told you, it's not just going to be me talking for the entire night. I need you guys to think.
The question is, what is evil now?
Okay, so you're going right to the foundation.
Yeah.
What do you mean by evil?
Yeah, how do you define it?
Let's say suffering. Well, why does God want us to suffer? Why should I Why? And by the way, my wife, she used to work as a chaplain in a hospital in Houston. She said that this was, when you're going to someone who's just about to die, this was one of the main issues that people would be struggling with. Someone who's dying of cancer, why would God do this to me? You know, what did I do to deserve this? So I get the logical issue. What is evil, right? Philosophically. But someone that's actually going through it, you may have a little bit more of a challenge. And we're going to get into this tomorrow as well. That we're not just logical robots.
Somebody can test you.
What's that?
He can test you.
He can test you. Well, why does he want to test you? If he's loving, why? Yes?
Because we don't know what the aftermath of suffering is.
Okay, you don't know the aftermath.
We don't know ultimately what suffering means to God, since He's all-knowing.
Okay.
The reason why we go through suffering, because He knows, because He's all-knowing, all-loving.
Okay.
He ultimately knows why we have to go through this. Nobody can justify exactly what suffering is all about.
Okay, good. Yes, back there. Yeah. People don't know what happiness really is. Okay, very good.
I think also it brings you closer to your deen. If you suffer or you see others suffer or you see evil in the world,
Sure.
you just pray that your family's protected, you're protected. So I think there's sometimes tests, like somebody was saying, to really test your faith.
Okay.
Bring you closer or far away.
Okay, gotcha. They're right behind you. Yes.
You just appreciate what you have more.
Okay.
If you suffered through something.
Okay, very good.
We just took for granted earlier.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So now, I mentioned that there's two forms. Yeah, you want to go for it.
Yeah, the other thing is, we don't know what's best because Allah Ta'ala knows, the future. So maybe in some situation, it looks to us, suffering.
Yeah.
But it may be the best, for us.
Sure. Sure. Right, exactly. Wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun, right? Allah knows, you don't know. So what I'm getting from you guys is all the correct responses. And you want to know why I'm getting that? It's because you sourced it from the Quran and you understand that Allah has knowledge and He's wise. Okay? So one of the first issues that we see is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have only 3 attributes. He has many attributes, right? So to abstract 3 and say, look, this is God, this is the first issue. Everyone get that? Because we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Hakim. That He has wisdom behind everything that He does. And if He has, as a friend of mine says, He has the picture and we have the pixels. Make sense? Right? And so, therefore, there could be reasons that we don't know, but the fact that Allah is Al-Hakim, we have to show that He's Al-Hakim and we don't have to show the hikmah. Right? We have to show that He is the most wise, but it's not necessary to show the actual wisdom with every piece of suffering that happens. Okay? Now that is what you've gotten from your religion, by the way, from Islam. What's the problem with Christianity, though? Why was the guy struggling?
Because they all go into heaven.
That's one issue. And in fact, I used this last night in the debate.
Jesus died for their sins, right?
Yeah.
So they're not supposed to, ultimately,
Right.
they're not supposed to suffer because somebody has sacrificed themselves.
Yes, yes. Very good. I used this last night, by the way. There was a conversation we had.
Did it work?
Yeah.
I used to be one.
Ah, okay.
Alhamdulillah. We did it, when I was one, we didn't have the 99
Right.
attributes of Allah.
Well, what was the main, what is God?
Well, I'm Armenian, so
Okay.
we're Armenian apostolic anyway.
Sure.
We
Well, what is
just
God?
saw What is God?
In the Christian faith. Very simple. God is love.
Yes. For us,
There wasn't that? Okay.
No.
For the pastor that I was having the conversation with,
That's why
so
I said I'm
for them, they've abstracted that God is love. And all loving. And in fact, he said unconditionally loving. And then he told me, your God is deficient because He loves some people and doesn't love some people. Right? That's what he was mentioning. But then I said, but then this is why he got into trouble. I can't imagine a God that is unconditionally loving. There's no conditions to His love, and yet people are suffering. So then he had to now capitulate on either His knowledge or His power, right? Okay. Now, some of you, yes.
Like you said, the Christians, they believe that God is Allah.
Yeah.
And I've heard of a Christian scientist who said, any problem you have suffering, it's all a mistake.
It's a mistake from God.
Well, they say it's not there, it's from Satan. And so then, then that's what I asked him. I said, then Satan's almost equal to God then.
Yeah.
You know, because he's got that power.
Yeah.
You know, destroy something that God, you know.
Right.
And so they believe that, you know, no, it's just it's Satan, you know, we can get rid of it by prayers and all that.
Right, right. No, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of interesting aspects that came up even last night, so but I can talk to you guys about that later, inshallah. Okay, let me kind of just move on, because I want to get through some of the material. So here's the thing, though. So someone said, and I don't remember who it was the idea of free will. Who said that? You said that, right? That's an excellent argument, all right? In other words, that if there was no evil, if everything was just good, then where's the choice, right? You can only choose good and good. Where's the test? Where's the choice? That's an excellent argument. However, I'm going to kind of give you, I'm going to come back as your atheist friend here, who's going to be like, but what about gratuitous evil? Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that there is certain types of evil that are so, like for instance, natural evil. Like where does free will come into that perspective? Like a tornado that kills like innocent children. How does that free will argument even work?
Well, they call it a natural disaster.
Right. But do you understand? So, and this is, by the way, in Christian theology, this is known as the free will defense, right? And there's a couple, and atheist theology came, they said, okay, hold on a second, that's fine, but that's when you talk about your personal, like person-to-person morality, right? Free will makes sense, right? That's a good defense. However, what about things like natural disasters? And this is what's known as the evidential form. So one was the logical form, this is the evidential form. In other words, you have so much evil that how do you explain? Why is all this superfluous evil? So personal evil, I get it. But what about things like natural disasters? What does free will have to do with that, right? So what we say, from the Islamic standpoint, is that that is a good argument, but when it comes to evil related to persons, right? That makes sense, the free will defense, okay? The other critique that someone may have about that, do you have free will in paradise? Do you? Come on, guys, it's easy, man. Do you have free will in paradise? Can you choose? You want cornflakes in paradise? Will you get it? Okay, khalas, all right? People are like, why? Ooh, who don't want cornflakes in paradise? Right? Anyways, okay, do you have free will in paradise? Okay, so how does that argument work there then? What do you think?
Because you're not expecting.
Wait. I feel like a teacher now. Hands, people.
Well, paradise is
Yes.
a different scenario because that's a consequence of the suffering in life. So you have only free will on the good things, not on evil.
Very good. So what he said, in fact, was correct in the sense that what we're talking about here is what we're talking about moral choices. But there's no concept of morality in paradise. Right? You don't have moral choices because now you're already in paradise. Make sense? So the free will defense works here because you can make moral choices. We're not talking about choosing between Wheaties and cornflakes. That's not well, maybe for some of you it's a moral choice, but meaning it's generally not going to be a moral choice, right? That's why paradise you still have free choice, right? What we're talking about here in terms of the free will defense is that that's a moral choice. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because when you're engaged with a lot of atheists, these are some of the retorts that they're going to come back with, right? So you want to be prepared, right, to understand before you get stumped and be like, wow, that's a good one. Not sure about that. Do we have free choice in paradise, right? Okay. Yes, you had a question or?
The natural disaster is a good point. So.
A good point. Okay. Alhamdulillah. But see, even from our tradition, even the natural disaster has a wisdom behind it. So keep that in mind, right? We understand Allah is Al-Hakim, and He has a wisdom for everything. Another important point to tie to this before I forget. Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will evil? You have to be careful here. Does He will evil? Does He create evil? He does? He doesn't. Oh wow, we're split. He does. Creates evil. Okay, how many people says that Allah creates evil?
It is documented in the Quran, right? And for some of the...
Okay, alright, very good. So people know coming from the Quran. How many people say that Allah is not responsible for evil? What is this? This is a new one, right? Yani, maybe, right? Okay, so the thing to understand is that when we talk about evil, there's an idea of absolute evil. Meaning evil being evil at its core, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from. But there's relative evil. Things that we perceive to be evil, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does create that. But an absolute evil, Allah is far removed from that. Meaning, what we perceive to be evil has a wisdom behind it, whether we know it or not. And you look at some of the classical books, they give some crazy examples, right? They say even like, you go into the bathroom and that smell, that has a wisdom behind it, right? Even whether you like it or not, whatever it might be, even that, if you perceive that as evil, even that has a wisdom behind it, right? So meaning, absolute evil is far removed from Allah, but that relative evil that we perceive still has a wisdom behind it. Make sense? Absolute meaning evil that is purely evil for the sake of evil. Basically, there's no consequence, no wisdom behind it.
For example,
I mean, nothing though. You can't really say anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates is purely absolute evil. Even shaitan has a wisdom. Even the hellfire has a wisdom.
No, so what is absolute evil? Can you give an example?
But you can't give an example because all you know is the created world. It's outside of your purview. Absolute evil meaning that evil is just purely evil. That's it. There's nothing, there can be no wisdom behind it.
Excuse me, so I'll repeat shaitan. What is shaitan then? Shaitan.
Right. So what I'm saying is, remember I started by saying, even if you don't know the wisdom, it doesn't mean there's not wisdom behind it. Right? So I said even the hellfire has wisdom. We might not know it, but it still has wisdom behind it. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is never doing things that are excluded from His wisdom. If that makes sense. Right? So what is the wisdom of shaitan? We could now think about that and say, okay, well, one of the wisdoms might be to test the human being, to whisper to the human being, to have a test, and that's fine. But those are things that we can speculate about. But even if we don't know them, it doesn't mean that there's no wisdom behind it. Once we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, and we've established all of that and who Allah is, we're talking about after that stage. We understand that Allah is wise.
There's nothing after that stage. This is confusing now.
This is confusing?
This is absolute evil. That
Yeah.
should be from, everything is from Allah. Allah is the creator of everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Right.
But there is absolute, inabsolute, unabsolute,
Sure.
But that's Allah. Allah has made everything from everything, right?
Right.
So absolute evil should come from Allah also.
But that's what I'm saying. There is no such thing as absolute evil.
I thought you said there is something. Okay.
Because Allah has created everything, and therefore evil. So that's what I'm saying. When we say absolute evil, it has no purpose except that it's evil. There's nothing behind it. It's just pure, right? And in fact, well, no, let me not mention that. So what I'm saying is, there's no thing within perception that you have that's absolute evil, because Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has made a wisdom behind everything. So relative sensing evil that we sense, right? Because evil itself, if you think about it, it has a relative nature to it, right? It has to be relative to something else, all right? So when you see a lion and it chases down a giraffe, right? Or a gazelle, let's say, now that's evil for the gazelle, but it's good for the lion, right? So there's a kind of a relativity. So what we're saying is, and I'm actually getting into a little more of the course than I want to, but by the fact that you have evil being in this relative form, the fact that it's relative means that it doesn't have, it's not going to have an objective standard by which it's pure evil. It has to be relative to something else. All right?
Shaitan is by himself in this world. There's no human being.
Yeah.
Who cares what he does, right?
Right, exactly. Like some star explodes in the middle of the universe or whatever, and it's like, oh, that's terrible. Okay, leish. Why is it terrible? Well, why? Right? It just exploded. You don't have any sort of reference point. You know what I'm saying? So what we're saying about absolute evil is something that's just evil by its very definition. It has no wisdom behind it, nothing.
Is that shaitan?
But it's not. But we say even there was a wisdom in creating shaitan. We might not know it.
But shaitan was not evil, right? When he was created.
No, I mean, we would not assume that.
Right.
Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates...
So there's some wisdom there, and then you can always claim wisdom.
You could claim wisdom, right. But my point is, just because you don't know it, doesn't mean it's not there. If we are ignorant of a certain wisdom, doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? Like I mentioned, Allah has the picture, we have the pixels. Right? Yes?
But I just
Sorry.
want to understand your reasoning about absolute evil. Because it's an adjective. So what we are saying, if somebody kills someone, and the person who's been murdered, his family will say this guy is an absolute evil man.
Yeah, but now I'm getting to semantics. You can be absolutely evil. We don't mean absolute in the sense that like his core is evil. In fact, what we say is his fitra is good, right? Which we'll get into a lot more detail tomorrow, right? So yeah, you can say that, but people use words in very interesting ways all the time. I'll give you a quick example. The word impossible, what does that mean? Not possible, thank you. Who said that? Thank you very much, all right? Here's the thing. Can Allah do the impossible? Wow, okay. Can Allah create a square circle? Really? Can Allah create a married bachelor? He can? Okay, what is a married bachelor? What's that? No, I asked this in some communities, and on the brother side, they're like, but brother, you're going to photo wives. And I'm just like, oh gosh. I'm like, dude, even then, you cannot be a married bachelor. It just doesn't work, right? So, all right. So can Allah make a married bachelor?
I believe God does not violate the absolute nature.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I don't think it's impossible.
Okay. So we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. Right? He is capable of doing anything. Right? فَعَالٌ لِمَا يُرِيدُ. He does whatever he wants. But the issue here isn't about the qudra, the ability of Allah. The issue here goes back to semantics, was my point. Now you can take two random words and smash them together and say, can God do it? But it doesn't have any meaning. What's a square circle? Someone tell me. So a square by definition has four sides. A circle by definition is round. Now, what is that thing that has four sides and is round at the same time? Nothing. It's just words you took and you smash them together. So when we say, so what that is known as impossible. It is not possible by means of the semantics that you use to put it together. It doesn't have to do with the actual ability. Because something like that we call difficult. A woman's child is stuck under a car, and all of a sudden she runs over and she lifts the car, and you're like, man, that was impossible. You can correct that person and be like, no, that was just really difficult. Right? Because impossible are two mutually exclusive things. And this becomes very important when people come to you, and especially atheists, with that whole, like, can God create a rock so big that even he can't move it? Okay, well, what does that mean? You're just taking words and you're smashing them together. Give me something of substance that actually has meaning, right? Okay, I kind of went off on a wild tangent because of semantics. So let me kind of reel ourselves back in. All right. The other issue that we find, or I shouldn't say issue, one of the other things that happens is that, very simply put, the logical problem is very easily solved. We say that Allah is Al-Hakim, there's a wisdom behind it, and we may not know it. Now, one complaint that someone may have to say, really, man, you're just going to pull out the wisdom card? I want you to imagine someone, like I mentioned, my wife was a chaplain in a hospital. Imagine she goes to that person and says, look, it's logically possible that God has a wisdom and that you just don't know it. How do you think that person's going to feel? Maybe insulted, but maybe like, you know what? That's fine, but like I have cancer. I'm going to die. And yeah, you got your logic, and that's great. But it's just, I'm not buying it. You get what I'm saying? Inshallah, tomorrow we're going to get into a very important part of the course, which is actually the first section. And what that is no doubt we're going to be presenting a lot of logical arguments. But what we have to understand is we are not logical robots. We are emotive beings. We have consciousness. We have we have a certain spirituality about ourselves, right? We have certain emotions and feelings. So when we are speaking to people, we have to be very careful in not treating them like robots. Well, that's a very logical problem, and we can logically solve that, man. Great. But you haven't really touched upon the core of the issue that person is, let's say, dying of cancer. Okay? So, you're in this scenario. How do you deal with this? You're like, whoa, man, that's heavy. We don't want to go there. We're just going to talk about like the logical problem of evil, and we're done, right? How would you deal with that? I want you to really ask yourself. Let's say you know someone who's a family member. You're a Muslim. You're a practicing Muslim. Why would Allah do that to me? What do we do? What do you tell this person? Be honest. What do you tell them? Hopefully don't take them into, well, there's two forms of the logical form, the evidential form, right? Don't do that, please. What do you tell this person? Help me out.
You usually try to talk about hope, that Allah is also can solve any problem, and if you're in this situation, He puts you in it, He could also get you out of it.
Take you out of it. Okay, very good. Yeah.
I actually had a friend who personally didn't do it, but his sister had to go through stuff like that.
Okay.
And I, like everyone else, probably the first thing I thought about was like the God thing, like, oh, God's gonna help me and stuff. But then, like, an emotion I didn't see that would, I didn't expect to come out of him, like, came out. He started like yelling, and he's like, God, it started going off about like, oh, if God, no, whatever, He's not with that, right?
Right.
So I feel like with a lot of these situations, saying the God thing, obviously we know our morals. A lot of other people, even believers, when you're in the situation, it's a whole.
It's a very different dynamic. Yeah. When you're in the situation, it's very different. Yeah. Some of the sisters had. Yes.
You just say you're sorry and you listen.
Okay. Very good. You know, we you know, after the incident happened in New Zealand, you guys know that the shooting that happened. So iERA got a message to go down there because after they had opened up those two masjids where the shooting happened, they said that they were getting 500 non-Muslim visitors a day, and they couldn't handle it. So they asked us to come. We went down there, and I thought they were just making it up, like 500 a day. Come on, man. You come to the States, and if you have like one non-Muslim walk in, everyone's like, woo, right? So 500 non-Muslims, and I'm thinking that's not even possible. But I tell you, wallahi, we would get there at Fajr time, and there'd be non-Muslims waiting outside the masjid. And we would stay till Isha, after Isha, 10, 11 o'clock, and there's still non-Muslims. So many of them took their shahada, Allahu Akbar, right? You can't imagine. I can tell you some of the craziest stories. I'll tell you one in a little bit. But my point with that, actually, what was my point with that? My point with that was that there's a very different dynamic between a logical issue and just being there for someone and comforting them. Because one of the things is, a lot of the families, this was the first time they're coming back to this masjid. And one of the benefits we had, and this is my point, is that while we were there as du'at, you know, to invite people to Islam, we had with us a therapist. And she provided a lot of very good information. Like one of the things we were saying is that, you know, the victims this and the victims that. And she said, don't say that, say survivors, right? Because just the terms that you use are going to have a certain effect on how you're going to be dealing with people, right? What they interpret, okay? Survivor is a very different word than the people that ended up living, or whatever, however you're going to put that, right? So what my point with that is, understand that you understand the logical problem, but there's an emotive problem as well, okay? So, and this was the other issue that I think my Christian friend was having, was that in the Christian tradition, there aren't that many wisdoms that are given. But when you come to the Islamic tradition, we have wisdom. We're not saying we know the wisdom behind everything, but we know many, which provides that kind of that emotive support. Okay, and I wanted to mention a few. I started looking into this, and there's like 20, 25, 30. I kept on going and going and going. Not that we know the wisdom behind everything, but there are certain wisdoms that we do know about. Okay, let me just mention a few, and I'll tell you that crazy Shahada story, and then we'll conclude with that and some Q&A. Okay? All right. One of those wisdoms is that we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of the nature of this dunya. The nature of the temporal nature of this world. Right? One of the other issues that I realized was that the Christians believe that this world is good. Right? God so loved the world that He sent His only begotten Son. That's what we say. Do we say the world is good?
No.
What do we say? Trials. In fact, the word dunya. Anyone know what the lowest, adna, right? Right? So if there's hayat dunya, there's hayat ulya, right? There's a higher life. So we don't even have that within our perception of the world itself. And so, like I said, he was in some trouble there, right? So we say that sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put you in a situation to have you understand the temporal nature of this world. And many times, I'm sure many of us have personal experiences with this, where we think things are going wonderfully, but then Allah shakes the person to bring that person back to the reality of this world. To bring that person back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to Himself. Like I remember someone had mentioned that was anyone here during 2008, financial crisis? Okay, a lot of you, all right. So someone mentioned that during the financial crisis, there was an individual that was very wealthy, but then lost everything. He was a Muslim. He lost everything that he had. And he says that I remember, and he was telling this story to a sheikh, and he said, I remember, sheikh, I was pulling out of my house. I had to take my kids out of their private Islamic school. I had to sell my house, get rid of it. My bank account was down to like almost nothing, right? I lost my job. All of my retirement funds were gone. And I was at the lowest stage in my life that I've ever been. He goes, I remember I was pulling out of our house. I stopped by the masjid because we were moving from the city. I stopped by the masjid and I put my head on the ground and I just started bawling. I just started crying. And I just started begging Allah, oh Allah, you know my situation. Help me out of this situation. He says the time moved on. We got back on our feet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took us out of the situation. He says, Wallahi shaykh, I would not trade that one moment that my head was on the ground and I was crying for all of the wealth that I lost. That one moment that I had that sincerity, that I was brought back to Allah, it's as if Allah took me from where I was, understanding where I was, and ripped me back to Himself. So sometimes the wisdom of these things is to realize the nature of this temporary world and the nature of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. Because what happens? When you're busy, you forget. Right? Even the salah is something that's just, all right, 4 and out. Right? Time for dhahr, we got to drop our 4 and then we're going to bounce. Right? And sometimes the salah doesn't do it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He loves the person, He puts them in a trial to bring them back. Because this life is ephemeral. It's temporary. Sah wala la? True? Sah. Okay. Now, one of the other wisdoms, for instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we spoke about the idea of this world. The other idea is to understand that there is an akhirah. When we are now, we are understanding that the suffering that we're going through is temporary. To the point that even if we're going through a long-term suffering, there is relief in the hereafter. Okay? So, for instance, there's a very interesting hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says that, and then from amongst that people, there were persons of the world who be brought and who had led a miserable life in the world. So this person, they had been living a terrible life. Maybe they were in a war zone. Maybe they were, they were hungry, they were poor, but they still kept their iman strong. But they had a terrible life. So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, he says, and this person will then be amongst those people who had terrible, miserable lives, and from amongst and they'll be from amongst the people of paradise. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring them forth and dip them once in paradise, and then ask them, did you suffer at all? And the person will say, no, my Lord, I did not suffer at all. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then take a person who was tyrannical in this world, enjoyed all of the delights, everything the world could offer. He or she was just someone who was, corrupt, etc. And He will dip them once in the hellfire and say, did you enjoy anything in this life? The person will say, my Lord, I didn't enjoy anything in this life. Right? So the point, what I'm trying to say, is that suffering, even that we're going through, understand that it is temporary. The main goal, the main objective is the akhirah. The main objective is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once we understand that, we see that suffering is easier to deal with. My wife, when she lost her father, my father-in-law passed away, she told me something and it still stuck with me. She says, if I wasn't Muslim, I don't think I could have gotten through that. She was very close with her father. She said, if I wasn't Muslim, if I didn't realize that, her father was, mashallah, a pious person. He was the one he was in muaddin of the masjid, right? And, he was a very pious person. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him Jannah. So she says, if it wasn't for Islam, I don't think I could have gotten through it. I would have been broken, destroyed. Yes?
I was diagnosed with leukemia a year ago. And 5 years ago, I took Shahada in this masjid. And if I didn't, who knows where I would be today. So, this is my sister, and every day she says, if I was not Muslim, I don't know how I would have dealt with this. And you have no idea the blessings that came from my sickness. so much that almost I'm in remission. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
So,
May Allah give you a complete shifa.
suffering for a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but it's true. It's if people don't understand, and at my job, there's no Muslim women. We're all women.
Right.
And they see what happened to me.
Yeah.
And they because I pray in a little office.
Yeah.
Some people tell me, "Can you pray for this? Can you?"
Allah
I think you're
Akbar.
praying. Yeah, they ask me.
Your prayer works.
You can do the same. I work with an 84-year-old woman. So all
Mashallah.
she does is like, my life changed because you pray. Well,
Allah Akbar.
I would
anyway,
charge
but
$20.
it's true.
What's that?
I would charge $20 for you.
Man, come on, dude. This Silicon Valley mentality, man. You guys gotta get rid of this stuff, man.
It's a profitable business.
Look, I didn't want to say that.
All right. Brother Bash, how are we doing on time? I just want to make sure I'm not disrespectful of people's time. How long have we been going for?
An hour and 10 minutes.
I've been going for an hour and 10 minutes, really?
An hour and 7 minutes.
Okay, so I should probably wrap this up. I know a lot of people are tired. So let me just, let me mention the Shahada story. How about that? The most incredible Shahada story that I saw when I was there, and I'll wrap it up with that, okay? So here's what it was. Like I mentioned, many people came in, and one of the most fascinating things was that our da'wah was not very difficult. Like, we barely said anything, to be really honest. Tell that God is one and the only one worthy of worship. This is the man, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is who he is. Okay, that sounds great. I mean, you can't imagine how easy it was, right? Okay. So now we have people, they're taking their shahada, and this woman, she walks in, and she was from Christchurch. But she's originally from Fiji. Fiji. And so she comes in, and a lot of people, what they realized was that the masjid itself was actually the dawah. Because if you typically go into a masjid, you don't see too much fanfare, right? You go to a church or like a synagogue, I mean, there's a lot of just a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot of music, there's a lot of decoration. When you come to the masjid, it's pretty much empty, right? I mean, we have some stuff, we have some, maybe some calligraphy, a little bit, But imagine, what's that? Microphone. You have a microphone, which works half the time, right? Anyway. But if you think about the masjid in Christchurch, it was literally bare because they had to take out the carpets because of all of the blood and stuff like that, and the walls they had to paint over it because of, again, there was blood splatter and so on. So it was very bare, and so people would walk in and they would say, you know what? I just feel this serenity that I can't explain, right? And literally, what are you looking at? You're looking at just an empty space, but that empty space is where, and the brothers and sisters, they were very proud of this. There was a certain, they said, we pray Fajr first in the world. Because they're in New Zealand. They said, we pray Fajr first. Anyhow. So this lady, she had walked in, and maybe it was because of the masjid, maybe whatever the reason, so she takes her shahada. So, when someone takes shahada, everyone gathers, the sisters start hugging, there's a lot of crying. So one of the du'at that was visiting us, he was from Australia. And he came out the front entrance, and he asked about the sister, and she said, oh, I just took my shahada, and so on and so forth. And he's talking to her for a little while. All of a sudden, he burst into tears. Now, he's an experienced guy. He's seen many shahadas. So when you've seen it, and this might going to sound really bad, but when you've seen it a lot of times, you don't generally burst into tears. Maybe the first time you see it, you're like, wow, but after a certain amount, you're not. So we were very perplexed because we're like, what happened to, so-and-so? He bursts into tears, he runs back into the masjid, and he falls into sajda. And he's just crying. And so we're just really confused. And so, he comes back out, and he's telling us this. He's like, I came back out, and I asked the sister about her family. And her father had abandoned her when she was young, right? And so she grew up with her mother, who was, I guess, Hindu. And she was brought up in Christchurch. Now, his father had abandoned him. And he was brought up in an orphanage. He was adopted by Muslim parents, and that's why he was Muslim. He spoke to her, and he said to her sister, your father and my father are the same person. He found her sister on the day she took her shahadas. And we were invited to her house the next day, and she cooked for us, and it was just beautiful, right? So anyways, that was the most craziest shahada story from New Zealand. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring peace to the survivors, and grant the people that have passed away Jannat al-Firdaus. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all of you for attentively listening, interacting If I said anything because of my Texanness, please forgive that, inshallah. Anything of benefit was all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and anything of mistakes or issues or problems was from myself. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all of you. Jazakumullah khair. You guys have an amazing, beautiful community. And I ask Allah to bless it and make you guys firm in your Islam so that you are a light for the people around us. So, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
That's why I understand you.